All right, welcome into a new edition of Carps Corner and cruising here through the summer, getting ready to approach 4th of July weekend, which is probably my favorite holiday of the year. Love 4th of July, everything it represents. If you're in the north, it's a warm holiday. It's usually nice outside if you can prevent the rain. A lot of times it's hot, so you get that, but you can only complain one way. So I'll complain about the cold much more than I'm going to complain about the heat. I can handle the heat and it's going to be fun. It's going to be nice. And you get the fireworks going. You get a lot of patriotic songs. And to me, it was always the midway point of the summer because when you play football, usually end of July, early August is the start of football season. So poof, summer's over. Get out of school sometime around Memorial Day, early June. So that 4th of July holiday, it's like right there. That's the delineating mark that I've always looked at. If you're a football player, after the 4th of July, like you're excited, you're ready to go, but you start to get that pit in your stomach. You can kind of feel it knowing you only have a couple of weeks left. And in those couple of weeks, you got to be training. You got to be ready to go. You've got to be in peak physical condition to be able to go out there and get the job done and play at a really, really high level. And so for both college and NFL, this 4th of July weekend, it's like the last big hurrah because you got a couple of weeks and then all of a sudden you're going to be ratcheting down. And it's the long march towards New Year's in the NFL and college, even towards Thanksgiving-ish weekend, first week of December, till you finally get some time off, get a little reprieve. So that's their understanding. We got some NFL news today. We got some college news that we'll get into. First of all, I want to start off with something super positive. We'll throw this up here about my guy, Terry Mack, Mr. Terry McLaurin. You see this great tweet. One of 6 players in the last 25 seasons to have 50 plus receptions, 900 receiving yards, and 4 TDs in each of his first 3 seasons. The other ones, DK Metcalf, Michael Thomas, Odell Beckham Jr., AJ Green, and Randy Moss. So if you think about that, putting him in some elite company. And so he set out of minicamp, set out OTAs, and I got a chance to talk to Terry right before the deal got done. He was confident. He thought they were going to take care of him and they would do the right thing, and they were working towards it in the right way. So Terry McLaurin, 3-year extension, $71 million in new money, $28 million signing bonus, which is the largest ever signing bonus for a wide receiver, and $53 million about is guaranteed of that deal. So about 75% somewhere in there. So going to probably see every dollar of that deal. And then in a handful of years, he'll be able to come up for free agency again and see if he can get another bite at the apple. But Terry McLaurin is the epitome of what you're looking for in a receiver. 5-star guy, goes to Ohio State, gets red-shirted, he's catching like 10 balls as a sophomore, 19 as a junior, finally has a big senior year. And after 5 years in college, finally gets his due and starts moving in the right direction, being able to have success. So awesome for Terry. That hard work in college ultimately paying off, having success in the NFL and being able to get it done. So I'm very, very happy for him and excited for him to be able to do that and get the cash he needs. And frankly, the Washington Commanders need some positive publicity as well. So that's a big thing for them. Getting their guy signed, great dude in the community, great guy on camera. You can put him in front of the mic and he's going to say all the right things. And so he finally gets taken care of, finally gets paid. Now, on the other side of that, we're in the middle right now of the Deshaun Watson hearing, the first of its kind in the NFL. Talked about it last episode. The federal judge, the arbiter, Sue Robinson, is going to be overseeing this thing. NFL initially leaked out, pushing for 17 games. I always ask where the leaks come from and what are they there for? Well, I think that was pushed out. So the NFL can look like they were coming strong. We talked about that in the last episode. Now we'll throw this out here. And this is Mike Florio. And I don't agree with everything Mike says, but I do think I respect him in legal matters when his opinion is out of it because he isn't a lawyer and understands law far better than most. So the NFL leaks, it's more likely to accept Judge Robinson's ruling on Deshaun Watson if she suspends him 6 to 8 games. And this is his opinion. I think it's a rope-a-dope move by the league. Here's why. And gets in there and basically says the Browns pushed for 17. Or rather, the NFL pushed for 17, according to Mike Florio. They leaked that out to appear to be tough. all of a sudden now talks broke down. They're in front of Sue Robinson. And listen, the league, people get a feeling in court. That's why you see people settle all the time in civil and criminal cases when you feel like you have a losing hand. And so you'd rather lose a little than ultimately lose a lot. And so the NFL, maybe they've overplayed this. I don't know what the burden of proof is going to be in this case. Sue Robinson, like I said, she's a federal judge. Is it going to be more criminal? Probably not. Is it going to be civil? Not sure. Conduct detrimental to the league, damaging the personal conduct policy. Well, there's a lot of allegations, but what is ultimately going to be proven? I go back to the training day mantra. It's not what you know, it's what you can prove. And so whether or not stuff happened, that's up for, Sue Robinson to dive in there and try to figure out the likelihood it happened, what's true, if there's anything that's false in some of these testimonies. So that's up to her to try to determine what that's going to be. But the NFL coming out and saying they would accept 6 to 8 games now means that there's a worry within the NFL that, you know what, this thing could be 4 or less. And if that's the case, then they're worried about having a PR nightmare on their hands. And the people will be very upset in the public, not Browns fans, but everyone else. And even some Browns fans as well. But they'll have groups that will be pushing on them and saying they need a stiffer suspension, even though now they have an independent arbiter. So you can't say, well, it's Roger Goodell trying to save the league, or he wants to send a message. They took it all out of his hands. But I know some people still won't be happy with this. They'll still want a pound of flesh due to this ruling. And so with all of that, not a great situation for the league. And it sounds like when we thought Deshaun Watson might be out for the whole season, which it looked like it was trending that way to me, the fact that the league is leaking this out, because no leaks are coincidental. Leaking out the fact it could only be 6 to 8 means that they might be bracing for a softer ruling. And so no one wants to go through the appeals process. You have a federal district court judge who's sitting in on it. You probably want to respect her ruling, especially in the initial hearing of this. Some college football news. Dive into that. New Big 12 commissioner, Brett Vormark, kind of a unique guy that they pulled out. Not a background really in college education, college athletics, or even in the professional football ranks. And you look at Sankey, where he came from, working his way up through colleges, ADs, working his way through smaller conferences. Same thing with Phillips out at in the ACC, was the AD at Northwestern. You look at Kevin Warren in the Big Ten, a little different path, comes from the NFL. And then you see George Kliavkoff, who, former MGM manager, of entertainment and promotions and different things. So that was kind of a unique thing. But what did the Pac-12 have? What do they still have? Well, they've got a revenue and a branding problem, and they have to find ways to get their television partners excited and get people back in the seats. The Big Ten and the SEC really don't have to worry about that right now. As we saw in the last episode, look at the fan bases, some of the biggest reside in those two areas. And so the Pac-12, going with Brett Vormark, COO of Rock Nation, global licensing and branding is what he did. And so if you're the Big 12, this is the guy you needed. You didn't need another athletic director, or someone who was a commissioner of a smaller conference, or someone who's an associate commissioner of another conference. You needed someone to come in who was going to sit here and look at your situation, say, we're losing the 2 biggest brands that we've ever had in Texas and OU. They're leaving and going to the SEC. We're bringing in Cincinnati. We're bringing in Houston. We're bringing in Central Florida. We've got BYU coming in. Here's what we already have. We've got a lot of the state of Texas still. We're in a pretty decent situation. And so how are we going to be able to monetize that? How do we get this out? How do we prop some of our schools up and try to promote them the best as possible to give us the most advantageous media rights deal? Because that is what this is about. Make no mistake, folks. Media rights are driving college football. The Big 12 may not be great right now in the football situation after the departure of OU and Texas. But if you look at what they've been able to do in basketball, Kansas, Baylor, leverage into that a little bit. See if you can get some good TV deals with that. It will pale in comparison to football, but then find a way to pull in some of that southwestern Ohio market. You've got BYU, which is a West Coast, Mountain West brand, but they've got some national appeal as well. You've got a little Florida market coming in. You've got a lot of Texas. So lean on into that. Figure out how to get creative with the streaming and to handle all of those things in the most effective way possible. So you look at the two conferences that have been struggling the most, going outside of the box. Pac-12, outside of the box with George Kliavkoff. Brett Vormark, outside of the box, CEO of Rock Nation with the Big 12. Like, have to go out and get creative and try to do something that maybe no one else has done and no one has really thought of. So I like that. I like what they're doing there. And I think it's a smart move for the Big 12. And frankly, I think it might have been their only move when you look at where they're positioned. They've got some good brands coming in. They're going to have to make sure they get ahead of this thing quick, fast, and in a hurry. Now, diving into some ACC stuff. They're the first college that or conference that came out and was talking about potentially changing up, how they're going to operate with getting rid of divisions. The Pac-12, they're getting rid of divisions now. And the ACC was like, okay, we're gonna bump our divisions, get rid of them, and with that, we're gonna create a new 3-5-5 model. What is that? You got your 3 locked-in rivals, which I like because schools have more than one rival, especially old conferences. Then you have 5 ACC schools you'll play, and then you'll rotate and have 5 more every 2 years so that over a 4-year period, you'll have a home and home with every school in your conference, which is good. That way fans get locked in with some of their rivalries, get to build some stuff there, but you also get to see a lot of the conference. And so we'll throw this up. Take a look at the ACC here. So big ones, Clemson, we're going to start with them. Florida State, Georgia Tech, NC State. You want to protect that Florida State and Clemson rivalry. That's going to be big time. That's really, really solid. Everybody loves it. That's one of the ones that'll be a big draw. And if you can get Florida State back to where they need to be, that's going to be huge. You look down on one of the other premier brands, Florida State. What are they doing? They've got Clemson, as I mentioned, and then their other their other locked-in game, one of them is Miami, and then you throw in a Syracuse. But Florida State now has the opportunity. They got a tough one. They got Clemson, and they've got Miami. That's going to be really, really difficult for them to play, but it does give them the opportunity, if they get good again, to play the best in their conference and be able to build, those competitive relationships and having top 10, top 15 matchups so that it will help their ability to get in the college football playoff. I'm assuming expansion. So I think the tougher the schedule, the better now, because I think 10-2 at some point will get you in should they go to 12 games. So if you're second in your conference, there's a good chance if you played tough teams and won some of those games, you're going to be able to get in. Then I look at Georgia Tech as we throw it back up there. Georgia Tech, they play schools with the highest combined winning percentage, I think, of all 3 of them. They've got Clemson, Louisville, and Wake Forest. Like that to me is just flat crazy. That's tough. That's some heavy sledding right there of teams they're going to play. Not to mention they play Georgia in the non-conference. Oh, by the way, they also have to rotate in Notre Dame every couple of years as well. So there'll be years where they're going to be really, really up against it. I mentioned Miami, who they're playing. They've got Florida State, but then they have 2 other locked-in old Big East foes with Boston College and Louisville. And Louisville, Miami go back a long ways because they both used to be independent and they play each other a decent amount. But you look at Syracuse, they've got Boston College, Florida State, and Pitt. So they're doing a good job of building in some Big East rivalry there. You look at Pitt, they have Boston College, Syracuse, Vautech, really old school, traditional Big East. And so that's one of the things that you saw here is the fact that they tried to build in these Big East rivalries and ACC rivalries historically with a lot of the teams that are playing. And the last one we'll kind of really dive into is, we'll get into North Carolina. They preserved that triangle big time. You got Carolina, Duke, NC State, and Virginia. So they've got a lot of the Tobacco Row element that they were looking for with everything. And Duke, they've got a big portion of that too with Carolina, NC State, and Wake Forest. They're going pure Tobacco Row right there. And then you go to Virginia Tech. And can Virginia Tech be what they once were? We'll see if they can get back to Frank Beamer and where they've been prior to this. They've got Pitt, they've got Virginia, and they've got Wake Forest. So you get the battle with Pitt, the traditional rivalry from the Big East. You get Virginia, your in-state foe, and then you get a Wake Forest in there too. So I personally like that a lot. I think that's a winner. I think it's a pretty good situation. So I like where they've gone with this. I like what the ACC's done. Believe me, nobody got everything that they wanted. It's a little bit like rushing for a sorority. My wife explained this to me with this, like, hey, how do you figure out who you want? How do sororities figure out who they want for the pledges? Like, well, you write down your top 3 or 4 on a piece of paper, and each sorority has their list. You submit them, and it's kind of like a draft, working some things around. And so credit to the ACC offices working with the schools, figuring out who's in there, who they can play, how that can all work out. And I hope for this, the Big Ten takes note. Hopefully the SEC takes note. Says, hey, get 2 or 3 rivals, build those things in, and then rotate games. No one's going to be happy. If you get 2 of the 3, good for you. Some schools may get all 3. Maybe a school gets one school that they're happy with as their built-in, locked-in rivalry. But the other good thing about it, it's only a 4-year deal. So it's not going to be something that's going to absolutely break them. If in 4 years, we need to tweak this, move this team here, move that team there, they can always do it. But at least this will serve as a starting off point, a jumping off point for how some of these colleges can do it. So I hope the Big Ten looks at this. I hope the SEC looks at this, thinking that this could be a great way to ultimately move forward. Thirsty today, man. It's been a hot one. So last time I'll finish up with this. Michigan won the Big Ten, beat Ohio State, played in the college football playoff. First time they've ever done those things in the last decade. And first time they've made the college football playoff, period. Won a Big Ten championship for the first time since, I believe, 2004. So they're able to do that. And you'd think you'd be able to pull that into recruiting and be able to create some momentum. Right now, Michigan's outside of the top 50. And I know, listen, I'm an Ohio State guy, but the Big Ten is better. College football is better when Michigan is better, and you need to have elite players to be good. And so I'm going to throw this up here. First of all, my guy, J-Book, does a good job trolling, finding stuff on message boards. We said Michigan board saying they're going to lose in-state 5-star quarterback Dante Moore to Oregon because he has a $3 to $4 million offer on the table from the Ducks. Michigan successfully countered with a box of Little Debbie's. I know that's tongue in cheek. I know that's a little funny, but from everything I've heard, talking to recruits and just coaches throughout the college football landscape, like Michigan isn't doing a great job with NIL. Michigan State doing a much better job, much more aggressive with NIL and being able to land recruits. And I'm not saying you have to be aggressive, but you have to figure out what type of program you want and how good you ultimately want to be. Does Michigan want to be great, or do they want to go back to kind of being average and being on the good side? Or are they trying to be back to the elite, to the upper crust? Because they were knocking on the door this year. They got in there, but you got to be able to consolidate that to qualify by doing it one more time and getting in that routine and doing that. You've got to be in the top 5 in recruiting, definitely top 10. And so we'll throw this up here. You know, Michigan, as I talked about, they just lost out on 5-star quarterback in state, Dante Moore, CJ Carr in state. They lost the grandson of Lloyd Carr, 4-star Brandon Davis Swain, who's in state, Raylan Wilson, who decommitted, tight end Andrew Rappelia decommitted, defensive tackle Joel Starling's decommitted, and they don't have currently a top 50 class. That is crazy. And so J-Book likes to take delight in that. You can laugh. You can think it's funny. They lost CJ Carr, the grandson of Lloyd Carr, who was the coach there. His dad played there, and he's going to Notre Dame. So you had a couple in-state 5-star quarterbacks. You got some in-state talented players, linebackers. Like, those are dudes you have to get. If you're Michigan, you've got to find a way to lock down in-state. You can't be losing guys to Notre Dame, Michigan State, or wherever, if you want to be what you were last year. which was a team who beat up Ohio State physically, who won the Big Ten, and made the college football playoff for the first time in their school's history. So that's big time ball. And for them to be able to do that, they have to start putting these recruiting classes together, stacking them one on top of the other to be able to have success. Will they continue to do it? Or Jim Harbaugh, who seems like he doesn't really want to be there? I think this is kind of the aftershocks a little bit when you start talking about the fact, that he wasn't there on signing day. He was out looking to potentially get another job. And so when you start to put all those things together, these are the fruits that you ultimately have to bear. These are the things that eventually come home, the chickens, if you will, that come home to roost. Because if you're in a situation like that, where you're not able to recruit after your best season that you've had, and Michigan typically is recruited pretty well. They've typically done a good job. But now you're sitting behind Ohio State, who's up near the top of the rankings. Notre Dame, I believe, is second. A lot of the SEC schools, they're still further back, but they always catch up at the end of the year. But you got Michigan State up there, Penn State. I mean, all of these schools are making big pushes. And this is the best year that you have had, but your coach squandered it because he was trying to get another job and wasn't interested in recruiting. And I don't think, from what I've heard, that there's a real firm NIL plan in place to being able to procure players. And not that you have to have that, but if you want to be elite in college football, you ultimately do. Well, that's it for this edition of Carps Corner. Thank you for tuning in. Subscribe, like, share. I got some questions coming in. It's going to be slow, hopefully, for the next couple of weeks, keeping guys out of trouble. And with that, I'll be able to answer some questions, pull in some guests, and be able to have a good time. So thank you for tuning in. And until next time, we'll see you soon.